Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Monday edition of the Wolverine podcast here on the Wolverine YouTube channel. If you're watching on the video side of things, or Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you're getting your shows, the On3 app, you can listen to us directly through that as well. We are truly everywhere. Two-man booth today. Anthony Broom here with Clayton Safey. Going to be a little bit of a shorter show, and I think I'm sure some of these summer shows, a lot of them will probably be a little bit shorter, just because we are in the barren times, so to speak, but there is some news to talk about with Michigan, specifically in terms of football and potentially seemingly very close to adding another quarterback to the room via the transfer portal. We will discuss that. Also, Malick Kordel, the German center, joins Michigan basketball, kind of under the radar. He just showed up in the directory one day. So we will discuss that as well. And as we do every week, we will take questions at the end of the show, which were submitted to us by our readers, listeners, followers, whatever you want to call yourself, over on the Fort, which, if you want to get access to the Fort, use that promo code UM1, which gets you 2 months of access to our site for only $1. Still the best deal there is, still the best deal in America. Take advantage of that today. 2 months at this point is going to get you into fall camp, and then you're going to love what you get out of it so much that you're going to stick around, and we'd love to have you. So use that promo code UM1 for 2 months of access for $1. Clayton, welcome in, my friend.
What is going on, man? I am pumped to talk some football. Yeah, you never know when you're going to add a guy from the portal. We had a Yabioki in mid-August, before 2022, right? And then feels late right now in mid-June, but that's still 2 months before that would have been. So Jake Garcia from East Carolina, excited to talk about him a little bit.
So there's a couple directions we could take this right off the bat. The first is state of the room. Why would they have another or why would they consider adding another quarterback? Or simply, who is Jake Garcia? Why would they have interest in him? I think we'll start with the state of the room at the moment. I think a lot of people's question would be, what's wrong with the quarterback room? Is Bryce Underwood hurt? Is Mikey Keene going to be ready for the season? Is Jaden Davis not ready to play? None of that seems to be the case. I think we are staring at a situation right now where Mikey Keene was obviously out of spring ball. You had Bryce Underwood and Jaden Davis taking all of the reps in spring practices, which was nice to, for both of those guys. I know a lot of the benefits are directly to Bryce Underwood because he is the projected starter. I think we both expect him to start, pending Mikey Keene making this incredible push and looking amazing in camp, which is always within the range of outcomes. But you've had two scholarship quarterbacks for the majority of this offseason that are healthy. Mikey Keene's been on the mend. We expect him to be ready. Davis Warren tears his ACL in the bowl game. Might be ready for the season. Like might be ready sometime in September, but not a guy that that's still a tough process to come back from. So when you look at a guy like Jake Garcia, I'll start by saying this. Let's just assume that Mikey Keene is going to be healthy. Bryce Underwood's in the room, Jaden Davis in the room. But really, you're an injury or two away, or an injury away, and maybe Bryce Underwood struggling from, right out the gate, to be in a little bit light and a little bit, I don't want to say in trouble in terms of your quarterback depth, but there's a big difference between Chase Herbstreit maybe needing to come into a game in an emergency situation and a guy in Jake Garcia, who I forget which schools he's coming from. He's coming directly from East Carolina, but the graphic that I've seen when he entered the transfer portal is that there were 4 schools that he's been at. So a guy who's a bit well-traveled, but someone who, like Mikey Keene, might just be more interested in coming and being part of a room and building those connections and just being part of a team that has a chance to win a lot of football games, maybe make the college football playoff, and you're set up with some contacts from there.
Yeah, well, there's a lot there. This could be his 4th school if he commits to Michigan in 5 years. Spent 2 at Miami, 1 at Missouri, and then 1 last year at East Carolina, where he was the starter to begin the season. Started for 6 games. Things did not go very well for the team as a whole. They fired Mike Houston halfway through the season, their head coach, and they went to Caden Hauser, former Michigan State quarterback, in the back half of the season. He leads them to a bowl game. They win the bowl game. So, he was projected to be a backup there and decided to look around. There hasn't been much buzz around his recruitment for the last couple months. He entered the portal in mid-April. Now it's mid-June, but, goes on a visit reportedly last week to Michigan, and seems like it's trending in the direction of him coming on to add some depth to this quarterback room. And he's a guy who started games, right? He started and won against Virginia when he was at Miami in 2022, got to play there. They had Tyler Van Dyke, who went down with an injury, and he stepped in and at least kept things afloat for, I think, played in 6-7 games that year. Didn't play at Missouri in 2023, but then, goes to a group of 5 school last season, begins the year as a starter. He's got a big arm. He's a guy with some talent, former top 100 recruit out of California who was originally committed to USC, then ended up signing with Miami. But there's some talent in there, and, has battled some injuries along the way, kind of had a long journey in college football. But we talked about this a couple months ago, right around the spring game, is, they still lost 2 transfer quarterbacks last year. Michigan did. Alex Orji and Jaden Denegal. Davis Warren, got hurt in the bowl game, and he's not going to be healthy, you wouldn't think, until fall camp at the absolute earliest. So it only makes sense to replace some of these guys. Chase Herbstreit, I don't really count as a viable option to play this year. So you have Bryce Underwood and then Mikey Keene, who came in and got injured right before the spring. So numbers-wise, you need somebody who's capable. You only have one quarterback on the entire roster that's thrown a pass in college, and that would be Mikey Keene, who, again, was banged up in the spring and has never played at the Power 5 level. So I think it's a good thing to, potentially add Jake Garcia. Looks like it's going to happen at this point. And, he's a guy that would come in knowing that, hey, I got to work for anything I get. If I could get the number 2 job, the very, very slim chance he wins the starting job. I wouldn't project it, but can't put a limit on anybody. Then he's going to do those things. But at the very least, it seems like if he's willing to come to Michigan, he'd be willing to help mentor Bryce Underwood, be a positive addition to the room, to the offense, to learn himself. And, also there's a money aspect to this. Revenue sharing is coming. Michigan's obviously done an incredible job with name, image, and likeness, and he has a young daughter that he needs to support. And you can cash in quite a bit in your last year of collegiate eligibility. So I think it checks a lot of boxes that way. Why stay at East Carolina and be the backup when you could come to Michigan, maybe make a little bit more and have a chance to contribute, whichever way that is, on a team that is going to compete for the college football playoff.
And you got to look at it from a guy like, look at Jack Tuttle, for example. He comes to Michigan, gosh, was it 2 years ago already, or at least a year ago? And, obviously mixed results on the field, but he was a guy that is now a member of this coaching staff. That's steady work for a guy that, if you want to make those connections in the industry. And I don't know that Jake Garcia, we know that Mikey Keene came to Michigan, not just to compete for the starting job, but sort of in that Tuttle mold. Maybe Garcia is in a similar vein, but this is very much a June 16th topic too, in terms of, Jake Garcia is not a guy, we're not sitting here and going to talk about him as a guy that has a chance to maybe even be QB2 on this roster. Maybe if Mikey Keene isn't healthy or has another setback,
he's got a chance. I'll say he's got a chance. He's got the license and the ability.
He's got a chance and he's got an opportunity. I don't know that I would predict that.
I'm not predicting,
but like you said, it's in the range of outcomes. So for them to reshape this quarterback room where you have, I think, a room, and I'm not going to question the maturity, the leadership of any of the guys that were in that room last year. I actually thought, despite the poor level of play, those guys were positive and they were, everything that happened, they took in stride and they were supportive of each other. But that you've been able to completely flip this room. You bring in a Bryce Underwood. You bring in a guy who has started games, really 2 guys that have started games at this level. If you're able to close the deal with Jake Garcia, who, again, it came out of nowhere. He visited last week. And it just seems like this is imminent. Like seems pretty likely to happen here. So I like the move. If it happens, I'm not going to sit here and say it's a ceiling changing move or, it's floor raising though. If you have Now you have 2 guys, maybe 3 guys who can legitimately compete for the backup quarterback job. We'll give Mikey Keene the benefit of the doubt. You have 2 guys that can compete for the starting quarterback job. That's a good place to be. And I think it would be a shrewd, nice back end move for them to make here ahead of the season. So I think really once you get this wrapped up, and I saw some people on social media saying, great, add another quarterback, but go get a wide receiver, go get an offensive lineman. I don't know that any moves like that are coming, but that you can maybe add a guy who can compete for your QB2, be your QB3, whatever the situation is in June. I just don't. There's nothing but upside to that.
And I think having a good backup quarterback can raise your ceiling as well, though. When you look at, let's say Bryce Underwood goes down with an ankle injury and he misses a series, a crucial series, a crucial quarter of a game that's tight, or a couple games, you need somebody to come in and maybe win you a game or two, or at least not lose you a game, right? If you have a lead or something like that, and you got to sustain it. And I think somebody, the backup quarterback job is really important. And, we saw what they went through last season. There was no good number one option, but even the bad number one options that ended up getting their chance at different points throughout the season, starting 3 quarterbacks, they didn't all stay healthy, right? You have the injury to Davis Warren in the bowl game. You have to go to Alex Orji, who essentially just didn't do it. They were just waiting, trying to run out the clock in that game against Alabama, which I watched last night on Big Ten Network again, right after the 2024 Ohio State game. It was a good night over here. But so, you had that happen. You had what Jack Tuttle went through in the middle of the season, where he finally got healthy enough to kind of play, but really was never there. And then you had to go back to Davis Warren for that Michigan State game. So, my point is it could be the difference in a game or two that ends up determining whether or not you make the college football playoff. Now, I don't think Jake Garcia is a guy who is, really, like, if he's your guy for more than a couple games or multiple games in general, it's probably not going to be a great season. I don't necessarily see yourself in the postseason, but at the same time, he does have some talent. Now, the big issue with Jake Garcia is the turnovers. He had, I think, 5 fumbles last year, but 12 interceptions to only 8 touchdown passes in 6 games, completed 60.2% of his passes for over 1,400 yards. But just making the mistakes, trying to make the big throw, I think was a big issue for him rather than taking what's there. And then Caden Hauser did a better job of that at the end of last season from East Carolina, from what I've gathered, and kind of had the team rally around him. So it was not a very good year for Garcia. Turnovers being a big issue, but if you have some more talent around you, if your role is to be a guy who just comes in and tries not to screw it up, maybe your mindset's a little bit different and the decision making will be different. So it'll be interesting. He's got he won't have much time if he does come into Michigan to get acclimated before fall camp, before the season. But if he can get a mindset shift and be ready to go whenever his time comes, which I wouldn't expect to be at the beginning of the year, so that'll give him a little bit of time to ease in, then it's worthwhile. But even if he never plays a snap this year, I think it's still a worthwhile addition.
You're pretty much hoping you never have to see Jake Garcia unless he's mopping up late in the game. That would be the ideal. It means that Bryce Underwood's healthy and playing well. It means that Mikey Keene, for the most part, is healthy and playing well. I did pull up his PFF page. That is Jake Garcia. 12 big-time throws last season, 17 turnover-worthy plays. I don't know how that compares to the Michigan guys, but yeah, he pretty much is what he is. Not going to sit here and say that he has a chance to do anything. I think he probably is at best your QB3. That's just my opinion, but there's 100 guys, 120 guys on a roster. You need some quality depth at all of those spots. So
do you want the number?
Jake, do you have them?
I do. Davis Warren, 6 big time throws, 9 turnover worthy plays. Jack Tuttle, 1 big time throw, 6 turnover worthy plays. Alex Orji, 0 big time throws, 3 turnover worthy plays. Donovan Edwards, no big time throws, no turnover worthy plays. So that's a pretty good ratio there. 1 completion for 23 yards. Just wanted to add that in. The Don never incompleted a pass at Michigan, but
so
yeah,
quick
those numbers.
math.
I don't know how much it matters how those compare because
for
it's going to look completely different.
For people that don't know what that is, those are just throws that whatever, it's completely subjective. PFF's graders that go through and watch the games can say, hey, that throw could have been picked off or that could have been intercepted. And it's not the turnovers you make. Now, I think the reason a lot of those Michigan guys' numbers are low is because they just didn't throw the ball. Alex Orji in particular never threw the ball. But to me, I think it's a good metric for how often do you put the ball in harm's way. So yeah, if you can kind of rein that in, we'll see if he has a chance to get up to speed. But he's not even here yet. So there's no playbook, there's no knowledge of the offense. There is no pecking order because he's not in the pecking order. But that's the kind of guy he is and what he brings to the table. So no, I don't think this is a referendum on Bryce Underwood or Mikey Keene. It might be on Jaden Davis. I don't know, but it might be on the health or the readiness of Davis Warren. Maybe that's the biggest thing would be adding another quarterback would be maybe with the knowledge that maybe Davis Warren isn't going to be ready by the time the season starts. I'm just spitballing here, but that is the situation. Any other thoughts on Michigan's quarterbacks at large?
I just to go off of what you were just saying there, like it's almost surprising they didn't add anyone sooner. So like, I don't think it's any new news on what the quarterback room looks like. It's just like they needed somebody for a long time, and now maybe somebody who has popped up that actually does check a lot of boxes for you. Like it's not easy to find a guy who started at least one game at the Power 5 level. He's been a starter at the Group of 5 level as well, and has been around college football a long time, is a veteran that would be willing to come in to a quarterback room that has, a guy who's going to be here for a while in Bryce Underwood and who by all accounts is really good. But then also, you have Mikey Keene, another guy in there with starting experience. So it's not an easy ask. It's like when I know they made contact with that Brendan Sullivan who was at Iowa and then transferred this spring actually was at Northwestern before that and then transferred to Iowa and was the backup last year, started some games as well at Iowa and then transferred to North Carolina in the spring. They reached out to him. I believe he went to Tulane, if I'm remembering correctly, and he's going to be the starter there, right? Like it's not easy to ask a guy who wants to start to come in behind Bryce Underwood because that, he especially a guy with 1 year left, like this is your last chance. So I think maybe Jake Garcia has realized that his options have run a little bit dry and that this would be a really good situation considering what this Michigan team looks like heading into 2025. I would imagine that's the case, and money plays a factor too. But, I don't think it's anything that is a new need for Michigan. They needed another number in that room. Again, only one guy has attempted a college pass, and those came at UCF and Fresno State, not Michigan, not in the Big Ten. So Garcia would lead all the guys. If he comes into this room, he'd have the most Power 5 snaps in that quarterback room. So it's not a bad thing to have, not a bad option to have.
Not at all. And it's different than last year when you're having the conversation about, well, why didn't they bring in a quarterback via the transfer portal? And there were the questions about, Kirk Campbell had never, and we're not here to drag Kirk Campbell. I don't want to get that mistaken, but the flip side of that is you have a guy now in Chip Lindsey who has done this for a long time. He's been here for almost 7 months now, and he's done his own thorough evaluation of the room. And these are the guys that he's chosen to bring in. And he's had, obviously the big fish was here before he was, which helps, but rounding out that room, setting a foundation, you kind of trust the conviction of a guy like that when it comes to the moves like that. So I think that's all I have on the quarterbacks. Of course, we spent most of the offseason talking about the shiny new toy, but we got to talk about all of them. So good times. Adding some depth, not a bad thing at quarterback, or at least it looks like they will. Let's move on to basketball now. We had wondered if/when Malick Kordel was going to be a thing at Michigan. And then was it midnight? As the clock's just after midnight on Friday, he just pops up into the directory. Maybe he was in the directory a little before then, but it was pointed out around them, and he is part of this class now. Malick Kordel, the German center, he just turned 21 in March, so a little bit of an older freshman, but he's 7'1", 250. He picked Michigan over schools like Xavier, Villanova, Iowa, Butler. I believe he visited it. Was it sometime in February that he was in town? But
yep.
You're waiting for one more piece. It seems like he is that piece, and he joins the class now with, you have obviously Ricky Liburd, who committed a couple weeks ago. Oscar Goodman enrolled in January. You've got Winters Grady. You've got Trey McKinney coming in. Nice little haul here in the 2025 class, and a guy who's not going to be asked to play a lot this year because you have Yaxel Lindeborg, Ade Mara, Marez Johnson. Nice to add a guy who's a bit of a lotto ticket and probably either back-end depth or a redshirt guy that you stash for a year.
And you know his hometown?
I do not.
Oberhausen, North Rhine-Westphalia, Germany. So shout out to Westphalia.
We love Westphalia.
Yeah. Westphalia, Michigan. A lot of people haven't been there. If you haven't, you should go at least once. You can go to one of the two bars they have in town, but Austin Fox, former staffer here at the Wolverine, is from there, and just massive Michigan fans there. So I'm sure they're when they learned that Malick Kordel is from there, they were excited about that. But yeah, I mean, this is something we've been kind of waiting to be able to say is happening for a little while here. And is a nice addition for Michigan. Like you said, he visited in February. That was for the Michigan State game. That's my photo of him there. As he was taking it in courtside before the game. He also visited,
thrilled, by the way.
What's that?
He looks thrilled, by the way.
Yeah, I know. He did. He was laughing because he caught me taking a photo of him. Then he gave a thumbs up. I think I got another photo with the thumbs up in there. But yeah, so Michigan's had a lot of success with players from Germany recently. Obviously, Moritz Wagner and Franz Wagner. So this is the first non-Wagner edition from Germany in a while. But he also visited Xavier in Iowa when he was on that trip here to the United States back in February. Both of those teams ended up with new head coaches, right? Sean Miller goes from Xavier to Texas. Fran McCaffrey gets fired at Iowa. And, now they have Ben McCollum there. So that was kind of nice, I think, from Michigan's standpoint. But at the same time, you have a lot to sell if you're Michigan in this department. You just developed Vlad Golden over the last 4 years who, look, this is a guy who came to prep school, Putnam Prep School in Connecticut, then goes to Texas Tech, and then really thrived in that third year in the United States once he was able to work under Dusty May. And the relationship that those two had was special. So if you're a guy that's going to come thousands of miles away, across the pond to play college basketball, then I think playing for Dusty May is, something that's been proven is a good thing for a foreign big man. But, as you said, like I'm not expecting a lot from Malick Kordel this season. I think he's more of a project big man that can be around for a few years here. Put up solid numbers. I think 11 points, 8 rebounds per game in the German BBL for Fraport. And they are the Skyliners, a nice, great nickname there. But a big guy who doesn't stretch the floor yet. We'll see how he expands his game, but pretty good finisher. I mean, you can tell when you watch his highlights, he moves pretty well in space. He can catch the ball and finish. And just a really interesting backstory. He didn't play basketball until 2021. He was actually a really good handball player, and they canceled handball in his league in Germany, and takes up basketball outdoors during COVID back in 2021, and has just become a player that's continuing to rise. I think a couple of years ago, he averaged only 3 points per game. So he's on the rise, even though he's an older player, as you mentioned, at 21 years old. Now, the interesting thing, I think, with his age is that we'll see what class he technically ends up in eligibility-wise, because the NCAA with some of these foreign guys, as you see coming in. I was reading about this a couple of weeks ago. I think it was The Athletic that did a big piece on just the record amount of international players coming into college basketball now. And some of them come in as freshmen or sophomores or juniors, depending on their age and what the NCAA gives them, because they've been playing pro, some of them for a couple of years. So, it's a nice luxury to have with these extra scholarship spots. You have an incredible front court on paper right now with Merez Johnson, Adai Mara, Yaxel Lendeborg, Oscar Goodman, Will Cheddar. Like, there's not a lot of pressure right away on Malick Kordel, and I think that's a good thing. He can develop behind the scenes, and you can have a guy that could pan out for the future and be one of the next international players that are really kind of taking college basketball by storm.
Yeah, so right now they are up to 13 players on the roster. You can have up to 15 scholarships allocated as soon as next season. And like I said, the freshman class, Oscar Goodman, Winters Grady, Trey McKinney, Ricky Leiberg. Obviously, you've got LJ Kaysen and Merez Johnson in that sophomore class. A couple juniors, and Elliot Cadeau and Adai Mara. Yaxel Lendeborg, Roddy Gale will be seniors. And then you've got a couple graduate guys, 5th and 6th year guys in Will Cheddar and Namari Burnett. So this feels like it's it. I'll never say never. Dusty May and his staff always seem to have their eyes open, but this seems like kind of the final shoe to drop, and this is the squad heading into next year. So I don't know. Like you said, I think there's a lot of work that Malick Kordel is going to need before he's ready to play. Everything I've read, and I've been doing a bit more reading on him since he is officially signed now, but really good finisher. That's something that they think they have, that they're going to be able to work with. So excited. And, for as much as we used to talk about how Juwan Howard had a bit of a Midas touch with the bigs, just in terms of Hunter Dickinson was a very good player with the Heat. He had developed guys. I always thought I liked, who was the guy that transferred to UConn? Why am I blanking on his name? Terrace Reed, I thought was solid. But Dusty May now, you've got the bird in hand with what you did with Vlad Golden. I think Adai Mara is going to do a lot of those types of things for you, at least next season, if not for the next 2 years. And we'll see what this program's able to do for Kordel. But how do you feel about this roster now with 13 guys in the mix?
Well, sticking on the big men front, Merez Johnson is really shining right now out in Colorado Springs during those Team USA tryouts. He's trying out for the U19 team that's going to go over to Europe and play in the World Cup later this summer. And he just made the first round of cuts. LJ Kaysen unfortunately cut, but that means he'll be back this week in Ann Arbor for the start of summer workouts. But I mean, Merez Johnson, apparently, according to ESPN's Jonathan Givney, looks like the projected starting center on this team as long as he continues this during training camp and ends up making the roster and going over there and playing in the World Cup. But that's going to be a good experience. And he may be, even taking a bigger leap early on here in his time at Michigan. Been here for about a month now. He was one of the guys that came early than even we thought. So he's competing at a really high level out there. I think that bodes really well. You kind of have just a ridiculous amount of talent in that front court right now. And it all starts there, really. I got an article coming out later about why Michigan can be an elite defensive team this coming season. And one of the reasons why is 2-point defense. It's the same exact formula that you had last season. They were elite in that category because they had a great rim protector in Vlad Golden and because they were able to switch screens with their versatile defenders and throw opponents off their game and not allow them to run their regular actions and make them play one-on-one and not really finish as well as they would have liked to. Of course, you had great positional size across the board too, including a second 7-footer in that lineup in Danny Wolf. So I think it's going to be a lot of the same formula this season on the defensive end. But as far as the roster as a whole, I mean, it's, you running it down there just made me think of just the great blend they have right now of veteran talent, a guy who could be in the pros this coming season in Yaxel Lendeborg, as well as a lot of really good, talented young players. And you can even throw Malick Kordel in that mix, even though he's 21 years old, right? But, you never know how long guys are going to stay now in college basketball. But, if things hold and as things are currently constructed, like that looks like a really good short and long-term group of guys for the Michigan basketball program that is considered right now like a top 5 type of team in college basketball. It's June 16th, so we can say those sort of things and kind of be like, yeah, you still never know. But you'd much rather have a roster like this than one that isn't being, praised. So I think they're in a really, really good spot with a bunch of talent and, roles that you can really envision for this year. But, but on the Merez Johnson, back to him, like you look at these guys on paper, maybe you look at the stats, we all watched them play, but there are also jumps to be made this offseason too, which I think makes things really exciting. Merez Johnson, LJ Kaysen, Adai Mara, like all those guys could be a lot better this coming year than they were in the past. And that's exciting because they got guys with a bunch of potential.
I look at this roster, and to me, it just feels like a deeper, maybe a little more physical upfront version of last year's team. I think from an archetype standpoint, 1 through 5, just in terms of your starting lineup, I think that's going to look pretty similar. Obviously, with Kordel being a bit more of a playmaker than Trey Donaldson was, but you've got options now. This isn't a group where, like last year, at times you'd get to maybe the 8th or 9th man and be like, man, I'm just hoping this guy can give you like replacement level minutes. But some of these freshmen, specifically guys like Winters Grady, Trey McKinney, I think McKinney has a chance to start, but if he's not starting, that might be even better news for you, because it means the guys that are a little bit older than him are playing extremely well. So you've got options. I think you've got a little more versatility. You've got some more optionality with some of the lineups you can throw out there. And, on last year's roster, Malick Kordel might have been the true backup center to Vlad Gold. Now he's the guy that you kind of put on the back burner and let those guys go from there. So I'm excited for it. We want football season. I'm super excited for football season, but I think we know for sure that this basketball team has a chance to do something, if not as special as what last year's did, maybe even push that boundary just a little bit further. So exciting times to be a Michigan fan in football and basketball. Any other final thoughts on hoops before we move to questions?
I don't think so. Other than Roddy Gale should be put in the group that I mentioned earlier with guys who could take a big jump. Because if he shoots 31.5% from 3, or something just like okay or below average, and he plays the way he did in all the areas other than shooting at the end of the season, he could be a hell of a good piece for this team. So there are a lot of guys that I think could be better than maybe we've ever seen them play at this level, and significantly so.
Roddy, I think to a certain extent, is what he is in terms of there are going to be ups, there are going to be downs, but can you get him to not go 2.5 months without making a 3-point shot? I think that's possible now that he's here for a second year, a little more comfortable. So, yeah, I think you can make a case for probably 10 guys that, if they take this leap, if they take that leap, this could be something special. And some of them are going to, some of them aren't, but all of them have a chance to. Super pumped for hoops this year. We're going to move to questions now. These, of course, were taken from our subscribers over at The Fort, as you know, is our premium message board, which, again, you can join our site for 2 months for only $1. Best deal in America, folks. Take advantage of that. Ask a question, and your question will be on the show. Let's start with a basketball question. This is from Wolverine Steve, who asks, I should say, who will be Michigan's leading scorer in basketball this year?
Who are the candidates, Anthony?
Yaxel Lendeborg. He would be my pick.
Yeah.
That's pretty much that's the one.
Right. I guess that's my point. Like, I think it's going to be him by quite a bit. You're going to platoon probably at center. I would imagine around 20 minutes per guy with Merez Johnson and Adai Mara. So I don't necessarily see them as guys that are going to lead this team in scoring. They will on individual nights, especially Mara. He can really get going if he gets his touch going. Beyond that, right? Who are the top candidates? Actually, Roddy Gale taking the jump that we talk about. He's a big time candidate for this to come in second, I think, behind Yaxel Lendeborg. But Namari Burnett's going to get you 10-ish points a game, and that's fantastic because he's a great shooter, and he's going to get a lot of good looks, I think, that are created by Malick Kordel, who's also not a great scorer, but is going to, again, create those opportunities for his teammates. So I think it's Yaxel Lendeborg, and then he's got the highest percentage to end up as Michigan's leading scorer, and then I think there's a pretty big drop off before the next couple candidates.
It's a slam dunk to me that it'll be Yaxel Lendeborg, unless Trey McKinney becomes basically what Michigan State had with Jace Richardson last year. I think that's possible. I don't know it's likely, but it is possible that he could be. He's a scoring machine and he's super efficient. So if he shoots the ball well enough, I think he would be a dark horse for that. I think, but that would probably mean he's a starter as well. This next one,
like there aren't many minutes. Like there's going to be a lot of guys that are going to play. So I just feel like the only guy who has a for sure role, well, I guess two guys, Malick Kordel and Yaxel Lendeborg, like you kind of know what their role is going to be. They're going to play 30 plus minutes a game. They're the only two, I think, that'll probably be in that boat. So it's hard to bet on somebody else. But you're right. Like somebody could, I mean, no one saw that coming from Jace Richardson. They all knew he was a great player. That was an unbelievable pickup to get, the son of a legend there. It's just a perfect fit at Michigan State last year. But no one thought he'd be that good. And even then, he didn't lead their team in scoring either, though. So it's going to be tough for a freshman to come in and do it.
Yeah, and they didn't really unleash him until late. He was coming off the bench. So, but we'll see what happens there. You paid Yaxel Lendeborg to come in and be a national player of the year type of guy. So I think this is going to run through him. So JJ Go Blue wants to know our receiving yards leader, receiving touchdowns leader, and one player on offense at a skill position we aren't talking about enough.
Donovan McCulley for receiving yards leader. I'm going to go with Donovan McCulley for receiving touchdowns leader as well. And, of course, the Indiana wide receiver transfer. And, he's a guy that had 4 catches last year, whatever it was. But at the same time, there wasn't a lot of production coming out of the Michigan receiving corps last season. The most productive guy was Tyler Morris, and he left. Now, tight end led you in receiving, but Colston Loveland's gone. So I'm going to go with Donovan McCulley. It feels like he's been the alpha in that room so far. And then a skill position player on offense that we're not talking about enough. Is it one of the running backs behind Justice Haynes and Jordan Marshall? Just because if one guy goes down, somebody's going to have to take some snaps. They have a lot of options there. You don't know how good they are. I think it's paramount those two, Marshall and Haynes, stay healthy. So maybe it's whoever the third running back might be, but it's just because we don't know who exactly of that group is going to earn that job.
I'm with you on McCulley for yards and touchdowns. It's hard for me my memory is completely shot as we've moved to summer here, but I feel like maybe not us, but in general, there's not a lot of people talking about Hogan Hansen. I think he could be a guy that I don't think he's going to step in and be what Colston Loveland was, but I do think he's got a good chance to be this team's top tight end by the time this season is over. So maybe that's the guy. I don't know. I think he's got all Big Ten potential as soon as this year. So
he
that
came
would be
to
my
mind.
pick there.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good one. He came to mind for me too. And one of the reasons why I didn't say him is because I feel like we have been a pro Hogan Hansen pod. And we have been talking about him a lot, but I agree. He's not getting much buzz. And part of it's what we talked about last week with Derek Moore not being an all Big Ten player in the preseason on Lindy's, probably because a lot of these guys just look at stats. And Hogan Hansen had 7, 8 catches last season, but the talent was there if you watch the games. And of course we do watch the games. So, we're high on Hogan Hansen, but
I'll put it to you this way.
Good option there.
We opened this show talking about Jake Garcia, who I think most fans won't even know is on the roster unless he has to get thrown into a game at some point. So we know we're a little more in the weeds, and I'm not saying, our opinion supersedes that of the average fan. I'm not saying that at all, but we're in the weeds a little bit. So it's tough for me to grasp, especially after we just wrapped this football preview, who's being talked about and who's not, because I feel like I wrote about 8 or 9 tight ends. I wrote about X amount of, so that would be my guy, though.
You know who else is in the weeds, though? People listening to Michigan Football Podcast on June 16th. So they're loving
That's right.
Yep.
That's right.
Appreciate you all.
And if you've pre-ordered your football preview, you will soon be burdened with the same knowledge that we are. Not burdened, but sometimes it is tough being smarter than your peer. It is. So, yeah, head over to the WolverineOnDemand.com. We have extended our pre-order offer until June 18th. So if you want to save yourself some money, head over there now, get that free shipping, get in on that. We haven't seen the page proofs of it yet, but I turned in my last page today. The bulk of my, our stuff was in a couple weeks ago. So super excited to see how it turns out, because it's a little more buzz, a little more excitement right now than there was maybe even in the lead up to last year at certain points. So some of that buzz has to do with Bryce Underwood, though, who's on our cover. And Chancellor 18 has a question on him, and he wants to know, is Bryce Underwood's number one target for his Michigan career A, on the roster, B, coming through the transfer portal, or C, coming in a future recruiting class?
It's such a good question. Like, who's going to be the guy that we associate at wide receiver or tight end with Bryce Underwood years from now? Kind of like you could with Jeremy Gallen and Devin Gardner, or, the first year of Brady Hoke when you had Denard and Junior Hemingway and those guys. Like, just who are going to be the guys we look back at and say, and remember him throwing to, Chad Henne and Manningham and all these guys. So it's a fantastic question. It's a really, really challenging question to answer. I'm going to say it's B or C, and those would be coming through the portal or coming in a future recruiting class, not necessarily on the roster. One, because let's say Donovan McCulley has an unbelievable season. He's second team All Big Ten. He is a semifinalist or finalist for the Biletnikoff Award. He's still only going to be here for one season. So who's going to be his number one target for his entire career? I'm going to bet on it being someone who is not currently on the roster. Now, there are some young candidates that may not have the production this year that are on the roster, but may break out in coming seasons. That could be Channing Goodwin, who's a redshirt freshman. That could be Andrew Marsh, Jamar Browder, Jacob Washington in the freshman class that came in with Bryce Underwood. So
that kid's good, by the way. I was watching him last week. Talk about needing a guy, Jacob Washington, a guy with size and track speed down the field. I don't know if, again, I don't know if it's this year. I would doubt that it is, given that he's a summer enrollee, but they attack their need for size and speed quite a bit in this class. I think kind of under the radar too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And now they need to address the need for those things in one person. Like, they have some guys with size, maybe they don't have the speed. They got some guys with speed, maybe not as much of the size, but guess what, Anthony? When wide receivers who are going to go in the transfer portal or they're high school recruits right now, and by the way, they're predicted to land 4-star Travis Johnson, who just came off his official visit. But when they see what Bryce Underwood does this year and the potential that he shows, I think that's going to attract a lot of receivers to Michigan. So it's just going to take a little bit of time here. But like you said, it's not like they didn't get a lot of talent in last year's class, because they did. I like all three of those guys. But to answer Chancellor's question, I'm going to go B or C. What are your thoughts on that one?
B or C is definitely most likely, but I'm going to go with A only because you've got guys that are here already. And I don't know who those next guys are. So I'm taking the weak way out with the bird in hand. The thing with bringing in a guy like Bryce Underwood, and we don't know how good he's going to be, but the idea is when you do bring in these number one overall recruit type of guys, those guys can make stars on their own by how good they are. I know that, Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, those dudes are incredible in their own right. But like, there was a Terrace Marshall in that group too, that Joe Burrow, he was a rising tide for all three of those guys. So when you have, and Joe Burrow wasn't the number one overall recruit, but he did wind up being the number one overall pick, which is what you hope Bryce Underwood is before his Michigan career is done. Guys like him, if they're as good as their ranking would suggest they are, they're also going to make their own stars by virtue of just how talented they are as well. So I can't sit here and plant a flag on any of the guys that are here already, but I do think the more reps you have with a guy like Bryce Underwood, obviously it's just the longevity and it's the more bites at the apple, so to speak. And there's a wide open, really outside of McCulley, it's wide open for snaps this year. It really is. You hope guys like Fred Moore and Samaj Morgan take a snap, but there's an opportunity for some of these freshmen to play as soon as this season. So we'll see if that happens. But yeah, I mean, I'm going to say it's probably through the portal, but I think I've made the case for all three.
Yeah, I was going to say I copped out by saying B and C, and I think you just picked all three of them at different points there.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to say that we don't know. He has a bonus question. Will his number one target be a wide receiver? And I think yes. That's an easy yes for me.
Yeah, target for sure. Yeah, definitely.
If you let me talk long enough, I'm going to make a case for all three. That's just how this goes sometimes. So apologies for that. Let's go to Sasquatch 616, our good buddy of the woods. He says, what career results will you need to see from Bryce to feel that he lived up to the hype? He says, personal stats and award and team accomplishments are all criteria you can use to get to your answer.
Yeah, there's a lot of layers to this because, I said this to you. I remember just when we were walking out of Schembechler Hall one day for a press conference, I think on signing day, is like, just because they paid him whatever they paid him to come here, and everyone in college football is getting paid, so it's not that much different than everybody else. And they're all different amounts, right, based on how good you are. Once he gets to Michigan, he's just a Michigan football player, and he has high expectations for himself. A bunch of people have high expectations for him, but I'm not going to hold him to like an unfair standard. And so I don't necessarily think he needs to meet the hype, because I think the hype is so much more than what's realistic. Now, I will say, like, to feel like he did kind of get to where I feel like I'm expecting is like he's a Heisman finalist at some point in his career. He's either a captain or a team leader on a Michigan football team that makes a deep run in the college football playoff at one point in his career. I think those are the two things that are important to me: the leadership that he brings if the team wins, and then I think a Heisman finalist that would make sure that he did meet the hype. He doesn't have to win one. He doesn't have to win a national championship necessarily. Those are really hard things to do. I mean, there are plenty of programs that have gone decades and decades without winning them. Michigan's been an outstanding program that had a lull there in the early part of this century, and it took them, 25 years to win another national championship. So it's really hard to do. You need pieces around you. You need an elite defense like J.J. McCarthy had. So, but I think, being on a winning team, being a leader, and then having those individual accomplishments, making it to New York for the Heisman Trophy, I think those would check some boxes for me.
Yeah, I'd like to see him. Let's just assume we'll assume he's here for 3 years, because if he's as good as he can be, he's not going to play a senior season. He's going to declare for the NFL draft.
And that might even be that might be a good answer for that. Like, if he plays 3 years, it means he was pretty damn good too. Yeah.
That's the expectation I have, because I do think that he has a chance to be that good. So if in 3 seasons, let's say that he racks up let's say 33 wins. That's 11 wins a year. That probably, I say total, that includes postseason. If he eclipses that benchmark, he's probably winning more games than that. You'll be in the college football playoff. But I'll say 30 or more wins. I'll say at least one deep college football playoff run, 2 wins over Ohio State, and is a first-round pick. I'm not even going to say number 1 overall pick, but can he be a top 10 pick like J.J. McCarthy was? I think he can, especially when it seems over these next few quarterback classes, there are less and less kind of unicorn-type guys. I think he has the chance to be that. That, to me, he will have lived up to the hype. And there are very good players that have played at Michigan that I think have been very good, but didn't quite live up to the hype. I would put Rashawn Gary in a category like that. To a certain extent, I would put Jabril Peppers into that category, but it doesn't mean they still weren't very good players. But you're talking about number 1 overall recruit. You're talking about a guy who should be a future first-round pick, has a chance to be a future first-round pick, it will be incredibly disappointing if he's not, given that I think he's the best high school quarterback to come out since Trevor Lawrence.
The draft may be a good indicator there. You're right. That would mean things didn't necessarily go as planned if you end up outside of the top half of the first round, because there aren't that many quarterbacks that go late first round anyway. Maybe, Lamar Jackson, Baltimore traded back in, I think, to get him because you get the 5th-year option. But if you're good enough, that position is valued high enough where you go early in the first round. So I think that's a good point if you want to make it about the draft. Now, I'll say J.J. McCarthy is a pretty good comparison here, because J.J. McCarthy, his career went better than expected, like to end up the number 10 overall pick, to win a national championship, to be, have the best Heisman Trophy odds entering the month of November in his junior season before he leaves early. All those things, made the college football playoff 3 times, twice as a starter, all these different things. I mean, that went better than expected. I think, to me, I know, it's a polarizing topic. I think Jabril Peppers, that went better than expected. I mean, he's a Heisman Trophy finalist as a primary defensive player. If they get a good spot, an accurate spot in Columbus, that 2016 team would be looked at similar to the way the 2021 Michigan football team was. Just that there's just, was that much riding on that terrible spot. So, but it is interesting because, like, there are guys that, people are going, I can already hear it. Like when you mentioned JJ there, people are going to say, well, he should be better than JJ because, he's rated higher and all these things. But JJ overperformed where he was rated. So I think you have to hold him to kind of a similar standard to McCarthy. And one of the best things McCarthy brought was his leadership. So not to, harp on that too much, but I think we're already seeing it from Bryce Underwood, and he's got a chance to be a special leader here, just like JJ was. And I'm expecting nothing less really for the next few years.
And again, I get tap the brakes. You don't want to put too much pressure on a guy early, but why do you make the investment that Michigan did and pull out the stops the way they did to not shoot for these big accolades, both from an individual and from a team perspective? So I don't think there's an expectation over these next 3 to 4 years too high to put on him, because that's why you make the investment you did. So, and he's going to be your starter. So there's really no need to baby him along, in my opinion. So let's go to this one from Trogdor, who says, has Chip Lindsey been successful in 2-minute drills? Are his offenses effective in the fourth quarter when the score is within 14 points? Does his offense generally have a number one receiver, i.e. clearly a go-to guy who is schemed open? And does he rotate back series to series, quarter to quarter, or just as the play requires? I'm going to be completely honest. I would love to do a deep dive on all of those things. I have not to this point. I don't know if you have, but the one thing I can say about him is that this is what I like best about what he brings to the table. He's got about a decade's worth of play calling experience where he's had these offenses that have scored pretty highly, like in the top third of scoring in the NCAA. He's worked with Todd Monken. He's worked with Gus Malzahn. He's done, he's been a part of offenses that are more spread based. He's done some stuff with the power spread, which I think might be kind of what the ultimate vision of what he does here is. But he's a guy who is going to take the strengths of what he has from a personnel standpoint, which I think this year means probably running the ball more and adapting to whatever he has to work with. So that's what I do know about him. The questions that Trogdor has asked, I think, are great summer deep dives.
Yeah, no, I agree. You hope all those things work out, right? A lot of it's personnel dependent too. Like, how effective is he going to be in the fourth quarter when the score's within 14 points? Well, if you're up, a certain amount like that, you better hope the run game's really good. You lean on your offensive line, your running backs. If you're down 14, you better hope that your quarterback's a hell of a good player. And I think he's got some of those guys to work with. So, a lot of it's year to year, but, I think generally speaking, he's had really successful offenses, and, that, speaks to the ability to pull out wins like that in situations like that. The number one receiver, I think, is interesting. I feel like, looking back at his past seasons, it's been a little bit more spread out. You've seen a lot of production from tight ends. They had a tight end that had a bunch of catches last season. You see involvement from the running backs in the pass game. So I'd say maybe not a guy that has like double the amount of catches as the next highest guy on the team, and they're going to spread it around. And then rotating backs will be interesting to watch too. I'm curious about how they're going to handle that with Marshall and Haynes. A lot of that could depend on what Tony Alford wants to do as well as the running backs coach and run game coordinator. But all worthy questions, all great questions that, like you said, I would love to find out more about. So we're not surprised when, hey, what's up with the running back rotation or, whatever it is come the season. Let's get people prepared for that. So we'll do some digging.
I think another thing I'll compliment on his part too is that you had a guy, you go back to the 2023 season at North Carolina, you had a guy in Drake May who obviously wound up being the number 3 overall pick. And on that same offense, you had a guy in Omarion Hampton who ran for 1,500 yards and 15 touchdowns and caught the ball. He had 29 catches for 222 yards and a touchdown. Followed that up the next season, Hampton did, without Drake May running the show. 281 carries, 1,660 yards, 15 touchdowns, 38 catches, 373 yards, 2 touchdowns. So you just go back 2 years ago, even like, first off, that shows that over the last 2 years, he's helped North Carolina produce 2 first-round picks in 2 very different aspects of offense. I get that he inherited those guys, but if he's got an Omarion Hampton on this roster, along with Bryce Underwood, holy crap, that's going to be a lot of fun to watch. But that in that 2023 season, you had this bell cow back who put up video game numbers in addition to a first-round talent at quarterback. When you stock the cupboard for this guy, he's going to get those guys the football. And I think that's the most exciting thing about that. So a little more juice, I think, needed at pass catcher. But you look at what the strength of this team is, I think it's going to be that run game. And I think Bryce Underwood's going to factor into that run game too with some of the designed runs. So obviously very, very excited to see that. We're going to take this last one from Chancellor 18, and Clayton liked it. So it's the one I'm going to take last. He says, how big will the 2026 hoops class be?
I don't even remember liking it, but it's a good question. It's impossible to answer right now. They have no commitments in 2026. I was actually writing about this earlier where like you have these spots. They got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 available for next season as the roster currently stands. And that number could change completely by the time they have to actually build this roster. They're starting to ramp up right now, 2026 recruiting. You're seeing a bunch of new offers. You saw Dusty May last week out in South Carolina at the MBPA Top 100 camp, and he was following closely 5-star wing Anthony Thompson out of Ohio. So like they're starting to build for that class, but at the same time, they just added somebody for this coming freshman class in mid-June. So it's going to be a long process. It's going to be hard to answer, but I would imagine it's another, class of about 3 to 5 players, and then a lot of transfer portal additions as well. And then hopefully some continuity with guys like LJ Case and Merez Johnson, who can come back and have another year. And then of course the current freshmen coming back for their sophomore season. But I think it's going to be a good mix of portal and a few high school guys.
The one thing it seems like, at least with some of the early 2026 buzz, is maybe a little more, I won't say willingness, but they might be doing some big game hunting, which is fun because you want the best players in here you could possibly get. I think that's going to do it for us. I said it was going to be a shorter show. Here we are, just around an hour anyways. That's what happens sometimes. You put a microphone in front of 2 of us, and gosh darn it, we're going to talk ball. So that's what we do. Basketball, football. It's a good time, as I said earlier, to be following both of those programs. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, leave us a review on the wherever you get the audio versions of your shows. Be sure to use that promo code UM1, which will get you 2 months of access to our site for only $1, and pre-order our football preview magazine, which our pre-order special has been extended to June 18th. Order before then. You're going to save the most money you possibly can and be as informed as any Michigan football fan is heading into the season. It's 160 full color pages with roster breakdowns, Big Ten preview, last year's year in review, columns from John, Chris, Clayton, Drew Hallett's column in there. This thing's jam-packed, so get your hands on that today. For Clayton Safey, For our producer, Megan, behind the scenes, I'm Anthony Broom. Happy Monday. We will talk to you again next time.